Welcome back to the 7th grade Mustache. On today's episode, we'll discuss consensus. Reality is what you can get away with. And I truly mean that because the herd mentality controls so much of how we perceive the world. The reason being is that our school system was created by the Rockefellers, and they own the publishing companies that published the textbooks, and they controlled what was in the textbooks. So therefore, they control the narrative. And that's why you don't hear a lot about how it was black people who built the pyramids, or there was a civilization called Tartaria that existed thousands of years ago. You don't hear about all these things. You don't hear about the Queen of California, who was an African woman. You don't hear about all these things. And so there's these generally accepted ideas that this is what we're going to believe and this is what our world is. The definition of consensus is that it's a generally accepted opinion or decision among a group of people, or a generally accepted idea.
What I was going to say is that it's crazy how the fact that when we think of media, we think of television and we think of computers, but media was books first. Media were the hieroglyphics on the wall, and we don't think about how powerful it is that when you put some shit in a book, that lie can carry over generations. And these people got that idea way before the rest of us got it. While the rest of us were out living and just figuring shit out, these motherfuckers like, okay, I can push my doctrine long beyond myself if I put it in a book. And I make it mandatory for these kids to read it. You dig? And so we don't, like I said, we don't ever look at books as media, but books are the original media.
In 2019, Wuhan, China hosted the Military World Games. It was determined by the House Foreign Affairs Republicans to be one of the planet's first super spreader events of the novel coronavirus pandemic. A top official at the National Institute of Health had conceded that the contrary to be repeated assertions. I'll start that again. A top official at the National Institutes of Health has conceded that, contrary to the repeated assertions of Dr. Fauci, the NIH did indeed fund highly dangerous gain-of-function research on bat-borne coronaviruses in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. In the letter, the company EcoHealth did indeed fail to report findings required by the terms of the NIH grant, and even more crucially, biohacking of viruses obtained by EcoHealth, which fall under the obvious definition of gain-of-function experiments. It was conducted at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Dr. Daszak spearheaded the silencing of scientists considering whether the novel coronavirus originated from a lab like the Wuhan Institute of Virology, had just 5 days to respond to the infraction. Now, compare this to the NIH apparent concession to Fauci pearl-clutching outrage over the sheer notion that his department carved out expectations from the Obama-era ban on gain-of-function research to fund the likes of EcoHealth. So not even a year ago, tried and true virologists like Robert Redfield, Trump's head of the CDC, were smeared as xenophobic bigots. Xenophobic meaning Asian bigots. So xenophobic bigots for entertaining the lab leak hypothesis, let alone the notion that Fauci and his friends funded the virus's creation. And now it's clear that few stateside would have any reason to hide the origins of the pandemic. That is, unless you subverted one President Barack Obama's ban on such funding research out of fear that a catastrophe like the likes of the COVID-19 might just happen. This was published on October the 20th, 2021 in the Washington Insider newspaper. What is happening now is the narrative is changing. The narrative is changing from we don't know where it came from, we don't know what it is, to it came from this place and this guy was involved at this time.
Let's break this down. so people understand. Fauci has denied the gain of function part. In fact, he whined and yelled out, "Why does that matter?" It matters completely because the virus was natural, but it was altered by gain of function. When the virus occurred naturally, it would go from bat to people. That was it. It would not go from people to people. That's how gain of function affects it. It was affected by gain of function. Now all of a sudden, it's a worldwide threat. Literally, these people paid for that to happen, and nobody wants to admit that you broke the law. You broke the first law where it said don't do gain of function. It was a law that we cannot fund gain of function. That goes back to Barack Obama. Now all of a sudden you start doing it, and all of a sudden people just get richer and we get sicker and we're dying. The poor people are getting sick and dying, and the rich people are getting richer. And if you don't believe that, we're not just talking about the Zuckerbergs. We're not just talking about the Gates. We're talking about just general rich people, even people in our own government, that when the market went down, they bought a bigger share of certain stock or a lot of stock. In the stock market, when you hear somebody say increase your position, what that means is that there's a downturn in the market or a downturn in that stock that you're looking at.
Listen, these were politicians
Yes.
that knew about this. And then Nancy Pelosi was asked about this 2 weeks ago before the Christmas holiday. And her response is, well, that we live in a free market and every citizen should be allowed to participate in a free market economy. So basically, she's admitting to this shit.
Yeah, what it is, but it's not her first time saying that. Let me be clear. That's not her first time making that kind of remark, because she was asked before when it was like, oh, where do you get your wealth from and all this other stuff.
Yeah, but this is the problem. These people have no shame, and the fact that this person is a civic servant. Okay, this person is a servant of the people. All right, duly elected. But this is the thing. They think they can have their cake and eat it too. She's telling you she can have her cake and eat it too. But the consensus has always been, hey, you can't do that, fucker. That's against the law. That's criminal activity.
But it's not. How come when poor who's the one who smokes weed with Snoop Dogg?
Martha Stewart.
So
inside trading. She went to jail for inside trading.
Yes, she went to jail for insider trading. How is this any different? Now, the reason it's different is because they don't have intimate knowledge of the company. That is true.
The problem. They have this information.
But hold it. They have some information. That's true. But I'm saying you sent this woman to jail for this exact same activity.
Hey, the reason why it's wrong because it's they're morally bankrupt. Listen, bitch, that's double dipping.
Look. Here's the deal. Here's the deal. Well, one, you're rich already, so you can invest your money how you want. But when these politicians, they get briefs all the fucking time. Like, hey, you need to be briefed. The president got briefed. The reason Trump was such a dick when it came to the coronavirus because he was briefed. He read it. He knew where it came from. He knew more information than we realized. So when you get these briefs, instead of these people like, oh, warning the people.
The crazy part is that he was actually keeping it real the whole time.
And people don't look. He's a dick.
Yes, he is a real shithead. But listen, a broken clock is right twice a day.
You know I love to say that.
And
I don't love to say it.
He said this is the China flu. 100%, and he was 100% right.
But that's because he was
But nobody
briefed.
wants to admit it because he's such an asshole.
And the thing is, nobody wants to say an asshole is right. I get that. Look, okay, there's certain things that are consensus. Let's talk about the consensus that we need to worry about. The consensus is the way people run the business. The consensus is the term good business. It's good for the business is something that we fall in line with now. Like literally, when you go to work, they're like, "Oh man, we need to cut this many people. We need to furlough this many people. We need to let this many people go because it's good for business." What's good for business should be good for everybody. It shouldn't just be the idea that by doing this one act, you make money for a business. That's good for business. Now, I get it. Technology is increasing, and so we might not need as many people. But it's hard for me to get my people to understand. See, I'm a labor leader. I'm like, look, man, you need to walk to that. When you in Walmart and they got them aisles where that you self-check, all you doing is fucking up the economy. go to where the person is. Force yourself to use a person. And then the people that work there are stupid too. Like you'll be at a bank and well, you can use the ATM for that. I'm like, if I use the ATM for that, you don't have a job. Well, sir, like I understand that. Whoever told you to say that, man, you should keep your damn mouth shut. You're talking yourself out of a job. But the thing is, we use this term "good for business." Well, what's good for the people? Because without people, there is no business. Without us, if we're all too broke to buy your product, if we're all too broke to contribute to the economy and to contribute to society, this good for business thing will fuck around and bankrupt us all. My partner just said morally bankrupt. That's what's happening. That this consensus is that if somebody uses that term, we back off. Like it's just like science. Like some kind of way people got you thinking science is a fact. Science is people asking questions, figuring shit out. Science is not some exact science. The only exact science is math, and math has approximations too. What about that? So this whole idea that consensus, we're talking about consensus, that the first people that came to America walked over some land bridge, but then you keep finding black folks that were here before that land bridge, and so they keep having to push that date back. The consensus is that the people in America are Asian. That's bullshit. The original habit, because the reason they're hitting you with that is because there were black folks already here, and these black folks have a claim to this land financially. And so you see it's being proven every day. Now, I'm not saying that life didn't originate in Africa. I'm not saying that. But the consensus is that Pangea happened so many years ago that people weren't formed yet. But we're finding out that whenever these super earthquakes happen, like literally they had that earthquake in Japan a few years back, and Japan moved to the right, to the east by like 8 to 15 feet. So what they're finding out is that when these natural events happen, that the movement of the plate tectonics in these continents or in these bodies, these land bodies, land masses move a lot more and a lot faster than we realize. It's not that 2.2 inches over every million years bullshit they're telling you, but that was a consensus. The consensus is you can't pay black folks reparations because it will cost too much. No, that's the consensus. America,
that's not true. See, the reason. Okay, I agree with what you're saying. The reason they tell you that is because they can't afford to do it. But the actuality is that they don't want to do it because they can print money like it's confetti, and without any consequence of inflation and crashing the economy. But hold on, let me finish my point. So in that situation, you can actually print enough money to do that, but they don't want to do it. Here's the deal: there is an entire civilization they don't talk about several. Because of they did not leave stone as evidence of their civilization. It's hard to show the rest of the public that these people existed. I'm talking about the Moor people. Now, you hear about this a lot, but the general consensus is that this is some wackadoo, hotep, crazy prison motherfucker that just got out and he learned about some shit from some 5%ers in jail. No, the Moor civilization is much older than people understand. But again, going back to my point I just made is that they did not leave anything in stone to show future generations they did indeed exist. So part of the reason is that it is a very old, ancient civilization that goes back even further than Egypt. Now, very few things survive time. Stone is the only thing that survives time. So I say this over and over again. If you want to lay claim to being a descendant of an ancient civilization, you have to have proof in stone. You hear that term a lot, like, it's in stone, the writing is in stone, that means it's concrete, that means it's real, that means you can touch it. That's exactly my point. You have to have something people can go and touch. The problem with a lot of ancient black civilizations is that a lot of it was done through the griot, the storyteller, which is a fantastic thing. But on its own, it's hard to show proof of anything by just going off of people's word, because there's been so much trickery since the Great Fall that you can't take people at their word.
It gets complicated too, because also people, like when you give them evidence, they'll say they don't accept your evidence. Like linguistically, there's connections between different cultures linguistically. When you sit here.
But here's the deal. So when they found these ancient African sculptures in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, people
Yes.
often wonder how they
They
got there, how
they
long
found
they've been there,
Egyptian
what they come
hieroglyphics
from.
in the Grand Canyon. Yes.
Right. But here's the
That's
thing.
real.
When people ask you, okay, are there any proof of these ancient Africans? There are. But they have been scooped up and hidden in places like the Smithsonian has a lot of ancient America in it. But see,
Downstairs, just like
right.
the Vatican.
And
Just like the
and
Vatican.
just like the Rockefellers started schools and started printing textbooks, they're the same people that made money in the expansion of America on the railroad system and the oil system, that they said, okay, we're going to hide all these ancient people and we're going to create the narrative that it was just native
You know,
savages here.
that's so deep. Hold on, Roscoe. That's deep. See what people don't get, that this was not some kind of Ku Klux Klan thing. You understand? This is not just a bunch of, we don't like Indians. No, this was systematic. As they explored and they found gold and oil and other resources, they also found proof of other societies, and they like, oh no, we got to wipe this out. And the deepest thing that I need people to understand is that sometimes they hide stuff in plain sight. The consensus is that the people that were here weren't civilized, or the consensus is nobody was over here. But we all sit there and watch the History Channel, The Curse of Oak Island. So who built this thing underground that goes down like 8-9 stories, and who built all these traps, and who built the people now have technology and they're trying to go, but they can't even recreate what was done. They can destroy shit. They can send a big tube down and fuck some shit up and send a camera down. But the people doing that, they don't understand who built it. They don't know if it was the Spanish, the Portuguese, or somebody else. And that tells you right there that the older technology may have been, the people that we replaced may have been more advanced than we give them credit for. And I'm not talking about the ancients. I'm just talking about the guys from the 16 and 1700s. You dig? So the whole idea that this was this is some terrorist group, this is the Ku Klux Klan. No, these are straight up. This is the Vatican. This is the Smithsonian. This is the Rockefellers. This is old money deciding, like, okay, we don't want there to be.
This is how the story's going to go.
Go. Period.
This is the lie that we're going to tell, and we need all of you under the pain of death to keep this lie going.
We all watched the Alien movie where when the government shows up and they say, this is, this is the narrative. This is what you're going to print in the newspaper. We've all seen it, but we're laughing about it because we think of it in that context. But the truth is, it was done in reality many, many times over, many-fold. So the consensus is that, hey, I need to get this check. I'm going to do what this dude tells me. The consensus is that there was nobody here worth anything before such and such, before this time. But whenever you find, we were talking about this before, in Mexico, they found that damn campsite that was 50,000 years old. And they told that woman she was crazy. She's like, nah, carbon dated it. Man, they kicked her out of archaeology like you wouldn't believe. But then 6 miles down the road, they found another campsite, 50,000 years old. Well, who was doing it? Because that land bridge theory don't go back no 50,000 years. That's how powerful consensus is. The consensus is science is better than religion when they're both the same thing. These people who think they're smart, the technocrats as we call them, they're basically worshiping science because science ain't proved shit. There's a bunch of people agreeing on some shit. Like, hey, this happens 9 times out of 10. This is what it means. Well, what do you do when you find something that disagrees with that? If you want that grant money, you're going to throw that shit away, my nigga. You understand? So consensus is dangerous.
Throughout history, there's been this molding and this shaping of the narrative. And so long as you can keep people, their perception controlled, you will have control over the narrative. You have control over that village and that town, that city, that civilization.
Those people. But you know what the problem with consensus is? It makes you feel sorry for the pimp. It makes you feel sorry for the wrong person. Consensus, like I said earlier, consensus is we can't pay reparations to black people. Oh, the country don't have enough money for that. But you got money for everything else. The consensus is, well, it's good for business. You know, then you go back to your desk thing. thinking like, oh man, I'm helping the business. Well, who's helping you?
Hold on, but the consensus on Bill Gates has always been that Bill Gates is a philanthropist, that he wants
Ooh,
to help
the
humanity.
world.
But the gift of
Yeah.
living in the information age is the truth seeps out. It gets out eventually. And there's murmurs and there's whispers about all these failed experiments
Experiments.
that he's
Yes.
had through his NGO, his non-governmental organization, in countries within Africa, in countries within India, and
Asia.
the rest of the developing world. And so you hear about these vaccine trials that fail. These girls in India who are dying from a
Human
cervical drug.
for the human papillomavirus. They use it in India and African girls.
That's
And
right.
these girls have convulsions for the rest of their lives.
Right.
Like not all of them,
But
but
what it is low-key sterilization, because you then begin to research, okay, who was his father, right? Like this guy, yeah, they say he's a self-made millionaire, but wait a minute, where did the money come from?
that's a conversation.
How did he get the money to start Microsoft? And
You find
then
out who these families are.
you find out,
that
you
shit
start
out.
following the money. See, when you follow the money, there's bodies. There's all types of bodies. And the reason why there's always bodies when you follow the money is because history is built on the skeletons of the losers. And so the people who did not win the big fights are the people who take these secrets to their grave. But then it's funny how eventually those ghosts get out of those vaults, of those mausoleums, and they just start whispering in the ears of the living and telling them, that's bullshit. I didn't die like that.
But here's the issue that we're not seeing, that people, the losers are making the rules. These Planned Parenthood motherfuckers, eugenic motherfuckers, they lost, but they didn't give up.
Because they got long money.
They also got a long game, and they recognize that, okay, a big loss, you know what, I got to regroup and try a different tactic, or wait for the right victim to come along. You know,
but
if
that long money is what funds things like Event 201, because he spent all these decades building up his financial independence, and so that he could then take his money, take this nostalgic, whimsical love that he has for his father and his father's ideology, and he then takes that and begins to research, and he puts his money into investments. Listen, in August 2020, Bill Gates had an interview with CBS News on television, and he said he invests in vaccines because it's a 20-to-1 return on investment.
If I invest $1 billion, I get 20 billion. Period.
Right.
That's what he said.
But he got to make sure that his hands don't get dirty. So he creates these organizations, these NGO, non-governmental organizations, that funnels the money through it. And as we talked about in 3 or 4 episodes back, there are groups that disperse these vaccines to other countries. And vaccine availability is based on how much money that country has. And so everybody gets the vaccine, but the developed countries get access to more vaccines, a wider variety of vaccines, whereas some countries only get 2. Countries in Africa only had Chinese one, Sinovac, and then they had the other one, the AstraZeneca, the one that killed DMX.
Here's a question: if all these vaccines are the same, there was a big article, I don't want to lie about the newspaper, where a black lady, she takes her son in to get vaccinated, and they give him the wrong vaccines. They gave him the measles, mumps, rubella, but then they try to charge us like, oh no, we gave you the wrong one. We got to charge you $220. She's like, well, it's part of my insurance. Yeah, but your insurance pays for the cheaper vaccine. So what? There's a $35 vaccine.
So I'm supposed to pay for your mistake? No,
your mistake.
No.
But what's the big deal? What's in that needle that's so different from the other needle? Because there's supposed to be vaccines, and that's the hustle. We don't recognize that there are brands to this shit. There's levels to this shit. The consensus is that a vaccine is a vaccine, and we're all good because we grew up with what nobody wants to realize is we're using the term vaccine out of context. A vaccine is a very specific thing. It is a dead or weakened form of the virus given to somebody so your body can recognize it, and you don't get polio, you don't get measles, mumps, or rubella, you don't get the shit. But all of a sudden, we use that term vaccine, and the shit that they're spinning in your arm is not the definition of a vaccine. This is not a weakened form of coronavirus. This is not that. This is something completely different. Some shit that was made in the lab, just like the coronavirus. The variant, the coronavirus that we see was made in the lab. Excuse me. The original one wasn't. So people are using the terms out of context, and then they convince themselves of shit. You know, people tell you like, I can't imagine what it would be like if I hadn't taken the vaccine. I'm like, you would have been fine. Like, I can't see the future. But a big part of this was the fact that when the coronavirus hit, people in America handled it wrong. And these are the authorities, supposedly. And that caused a shitload of deaths. But those deaths were necessary for us to get outraged and get scared and fund a virus research and take this shit and try to change the laws that literally nobody wants to admit that these corona vaccines were illegal because they were simply done as a contingency. There's other medicine out there. There's literally pills out there that work better than this, but nobody wanted those to come to market. Pfizer needed to make money back from the whole opioid scandal. You got all this shit. You have a fucking financial soap opera taking place in front of you, and nobody wants to understand that shit. But we're so scared. The consensus is the vaccine saved everybody. Not according to the numbers. That's all I'm saying.
So what's crazy is how in your face all this is. It's so in your face. And the crazy part is that the guy who actually spearheaded creating a biological weapon that would be unleashed on the entire world is the same guy that is the go-to, that is the expert on all of it.
Yeah, how is he the expert? Because he did it. He's done it before. The way AIDS hit, like this,
Consider this. If he wasn't considered the expert, they would be hunting him down. They would be burning every village to find him and hang him and draw and quarter his ass afterward.
And his kids and his wife.
So that's why you put him out front. That's why you put him in and make him this hero. That's why you create this false narrative around him. There was a guy. Go ahead.
Nobody heard this guy. Nobody knew who this guy was. And here's how bad the consensus is on Fauci. Everybody act like they knew who this nigga was to begin with. You understand? Like, you ever have, man, it's Fauci. Shit. Like, what? Like you can't even argue with a person about, hey, where does this nigga come from? You know, what's his background? Don't you know it's Anthony Fauci? Yeah, okay, I heard you the first time. So it means you don't know either. Man, and people walk off. You know, they don't want to have it. They're more worried about shutting down the argument because if you think about this shit logically, you may get upset. You may not be able to go to work tomorrow. You may not be able to deal with the shit when you realize that
it's called revolt. And they don't want people to revolt. They want you to keep the general consensus that we're all in this together, that nobody's double dipping, that nobody is taking advantage of the situation, that nobody is exploiting their position in the government, nobody exploiting their job at the CDC or the NIH or EcoHealth or any of these groups that are supposed to be benign.
Or ain't nobody making money off a patent that shit, for this shit. Like, oh, there's a patent for this? What do you mean? So they get money for the rest of their lives? But what about us? Nah, my nigga, this is a hustle at the highest level. It's so big that it's scary.
Here's the deal. This is how it works. All it takes is about 10% of the population to drive the general consensus. 10% is the amount of people that are out there believing the hype, believing these trends, driving these trends. 1% create the trends. 10% or the 9% of those people then take that and run with it to the rest of the population. And so what that 10% then does is they get on media platforms and they get on social media platforms and they control what can be tweeted or what can be posted on Facebook, or what is considered appealing on Instagram. That 10% that controls the eyes and ears of the rest of the herd. They control the head of the herd, where it's going, where you're steering it. So that 10% now, which is the 1% that created it, who is now usurped the 9%, paid them off or intimidated them into believing their narrative, and creating the general consensus is then what the remaining 90% believes.
The issue, people have made up their minds to begin with, and then they create whatever it takes for them to be right. It's like, you know, when a cop walks in and he has a suspect, he has to make that case. Okay, well, I got a suspect. That motherfucker was there. How did, you know, he makes the case to fit the suspect. He doesn't follow the evidence. You're supposed to follow the evidence. You're supposed to, like, okay, this happened, this DNA, and this is a fingerprint. Well, that's what people are doing when it comes to this entire coronavirus media, whatever you want to talk. They're going backwards. We've talked about it in the past. Like, you based on your opinion, you pick your media outlet. You're not watching media to learn. You're watching media to find somebody to agree with you. And so I piss people off all the time when I say this shit. I'm like, look, you're looking for somebody to agree with you. You should be looking for the truth. What does that mean? That means I told you what the answer was. You don't like my answer, then you go ask somebody else. So here's what you do. You ask somebody else who you think is smarter than me, and you only give them certain details. Like, hey, my homegirl's a lawyer. Hey, my cousin is a pharmacist. And I asked them. So what'd you ask them? You asked the question, the way you asked that question was framed a certain way where the only answer they could give is the answer to agree with you. But if you explain my point of view or you let me talk to them, I'll make you look like an idiot. So the issue is, this is more about somebody to agree with you. And you know this shit is wrong. You feel some kind of way about it, but you got to find some way to justify this shit. So you pick the media outlet that suits your needs. Instead of you're not looking for the truth. You're not looking for what really happened and the fact that we've been taken advantage of and people got richer. And the other thing we keep telling you about, when this market went down, people got scared. Broke people got scared. Rich people bought stock. Rich people bought crypto. Rich people, and they got richer because it was only a matter of time before this market went back up again. Yeah, I'm listening.
I'm going to give you a perfect example of that. The internet. The internet started as a military utility. And it was then brought into the mainstream around 92 and really in 93. And so all it took was 1% to create it. And then the 10% became the educational institutions. And so once it was in the educational institutions, then the rest of America first then absorbed it, and it became a big thing that took off like wildfire. And so now we all use the internet.
AOL, dial-up, Lycos, all these different terms, they ain't even around.
Netscape Navigator, all that stuff.
Look, they got their money and got out, but they were used.
Dude, how many web pages would you go to? It was Angel Fire this and Angel Fire that. All that was based off Netscape Navigator. And how you could like build your own web pages.
But see, and the exact same thing happened. It was co-opted by these certain people. Back in the day, the internet was for the people. Anybody can get on there and remember. Here's the biggest question for people who are old enough. MySpace and Facebook. What was better? MySpace was way better. You could create websites. You can do all this stuff. You saw people having their links on MySpace. It was dope as hell. But then you go to Facebook and you just got, hi, my name is Chet.
Facebook was just basically the chat section of MySpace. Because when you go to MySpace, it was like a dashboard. And it was kind of like you're sitting in somebody's car looking at the dashboard. Because you had music, you could see photographs, you could see all this stuff. And then you had this little chat section off to the side. That's basically what Facebook took and extrapolated into a whole thing.
Facebook is a step back.
Yeah,
it's literally a step back. But there's a reason for that. Is because he was backed by the right people, and then you find out that Zuckerberg is a Rockefeller or whatever. You find out so that's when you learn. Like, okay, let me get this straight. So we actually had some dope shit and we downplayed it. We went backwards, and just because they can control you and have, the idea of Facebook having tabs on you was decided a long time ago, before the technology existed. People don't understand a lot of these decisions are made before the technology exists. And then when it exists, you just go ahead and integrate it in there. And nobody is the wiser. It's a consensus that Facebook is better, but it's not true.
So there's many consensus, or many times that people have arrived at a consensus over time. And there's a very controversial one that is counter to the normal consensus. And it's that Jesus died on the cross. And so the consensus is that he died on the cross for our sins. And that nothing became of the corpse, because it
ascended
into heaven.
Yep.
And that's how you wind up with the Shroud of Turin and all these artifacts from the crucifixion that were then used in magic rituals.
People actually do have pieces of the cross, and that's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, that's real.
Right. But there is a story that he survived the crucifixion and that he married Mary Magdalene and had children. And those children became the royal bloodline of Europe's ruling class. There's a book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail. It discusses this idea, but it also presents some very interesting clues which may have led to this. But see, when you read further into this book, you see that the apple fell super far from the tree.
It rolled.
It rolled downhill and off a cliff. Because what became of these offspring were basically just despicable people, and people and their friends who began to practice the dark arts because they were swayed by fallen ones.
Well, the crazy part is that there's literally like 3 or 4 different royal families. There's the mercantile family. Like, this shit's deep. I've read
the Merovingians.
Merovingians. I couldn't. But they got different names and different. Like, the one in Italy is called this. The one in Spain is called that. And they're all variations, and they're all related. And I'm like, and they were interbreeding way before you could even. Yeah. Like, so whenever you hear about. There's a prince up in the European tower, and he was all hairy and shit. That's that inbreeding shit. Or it's the fact that some of them, in England, one of their original kings was a wild man. Was literally a wild man from the forest that became the king, and that shit gets crazy.
But here's the deal. This is based on consensus. So even if this alternate timeline has some validity to it, it may be based on the fact that it may not even be him. It may have been his brother that married and had children and became the bloodline of European royalty. See, the crazy part is there's no way. Hold on. There's no way to prove this because these are based on accusations. Because
there are people who don't realize he had siblings. You do realize that. When you tell them, like, hey, Jesus had younger brothers and sisters,
his brother named James.
Yes, James. People don't realize James. The definition of James is conqueror. Yes, Jesus had a little brother named James.
But check this out. Now, in the Nag Hammadi, you can read these lost scriptures. These are found in a cave in the Middle East, and there is a Gospel of James. So the crazy part about all this is that some people actually believe that this alternate timeline is true, but it's not. It's not really important that it's true. It's the fact that people believe it.
And they follow it. People are following whatever gets them the most. Mm-hmm. For those people who don't understand, there was an antiquities dealer. Remember, boy, that used to fake it. But this dude used to make fake artifacts. Well, he had this thing he called the Estuary of James. And so it's a box where James' body was placed, when it disintegrated or whatever. But here's the crazy part. So they raid him and they find all these artifacts. Some of them real, some of them fake. He literally had like a factory to make fake artifacts. But the thing was, the estuary James had real shit on it. Like he had etched James' name, but it was the wrong dialect. But then as they look at it, they like, this is the real. This ties back to Jesus' brother. We don't know what to do. We don't know if he faked the whole thing, or if he just happened to find the real one. And if so, there's like people. There's literally a black market of this shit. This goes back to when you hear about Ivan Van Sertima talk about these private collections. And so my brother Roscoe is telling you that people have these private collections of antiquities and they're worshiping him. They're doing dark magic.
There you go. There it is. The problem is that it's not the man. It's the man next to the man, next to the man, next to the goddamn man.
Here's for those that don't understand what we're saying. This is the conversation I had with a homeboy that was in the military. He's like, "Hey man, I'm atheist." I'm like, "You're not atheist, you're nihilist." But that's another conversation. You're an idiot. And so I said, "Well, what happens if your commanding officer tells you to do some shit that's immoral? Like, how do you know? Are you going to stop shooting little kids because he tells?" Hey man, them babies over there will be future. So at what point do you recognize that sometimes the boss or the person in charge can be a despicable person? Well, the point I'm making is that there's literally a whole. My brother said different timeline. There's so much information that's hidden from us, and that you wouldn't believe that it actually justifies or agrees with a lot of the stuff that we learned growing up. But these people are using that shit for something completely different. They're trying to change everything or increase their luck or their ability to make money or blood sacrifices or shit like that. Or they'll have like the Shroud of Turin and they'll have sex on it. You do not know what these motherfuckers are into. And that's why these private collections are so important, because there's so much information hidden. Like literally when they excavate shit in North America, they found all these different giants. Where did they go? My brother told you, the Smithsonian. Why would you want to keep that from us? Because then you find out the Nephilim was real, then you might find out everything else in the Bible's real.
But all the dirt in the world now is being done by NGOs, because it's how governments and powerful people can hide things and
in plain sight
and control from a distance. And so NGOs are the people that are doing all the dirt.
So what does NGO stand for, my brother?
Non-governmental organization. So the Smithsonian is just another NGO. That's it.
They can go over borders. That was something else that when we we're talking about consensus. Let's talk about cryptocurrency. There's nothing there. Nothing backs it. But the consensus is that this shit is worth a lot of money, so you need to get into it. But the bottom line is what makes Bitcoin so impressive is not the fact that is the blockchain, which is ingenious. It's the fact that this gives you the ability to move a lot of money over borders. That's what that is. So
okay, I'm going to give you an idea of what it represents. It represents gamification, and gamification is a modern phenomenon. Video games, playing cards, all these things, board games, gamification. We accept that these are the rules and this is how we're going to play.
Because you want to win, so you accept their rules.
That's right. So basically, the same applies for crypto. When you would go to the arcade back in the day, some arcades accept quarters, which is U.S. currency, and some accept tokens. We had this one called Family Fun Center. It was around until about 2005.
Oh, no, it opened back up. It just recently closed. They moved it out west, but that's not.
So at the original location, it was there until about 2005. All right. And this was the place to be, man. I mean, you could go
upstairs,
there, and
downstairs.
It was 3 stories. It was basically a warehouse full of arcade games.
Arcades.
Bananas, dude. Like this, you had all the cool stuff in the front, and then you had the OG ones in the back. Okay.
Look, you had
and so,
golf. Yes,
but
baseball,
to play, you had to pay. And so to play, you had to go and get tokens. And so
why is that important?
You have to go and get these tokens because the token grants you access into these other worlds. Okay. And so by getting these tokens, you then have value, because when you are playing these games, you can then get points and you can get extra men and all these virtual things. All right.
Well, don't forget the thing about the token was you couldn't use it anywhere else. So you spent
You
your money.
spent
You were
all
forced
your money that you
to 30
hard
bucks,
earned, sweated for, slinging papers, selling dope, whatever. Okay.
whatever.
And then your allowance. And then you go and you give it to these people, say, hey, I want some tokens so I can play, so I can be a part of this world. So let's think about what this has gotten you. Like, what did you
Yeah,
get from all this?
you can't exchange your tokens for regular money though.
You
You
did
can't
not get anything from this experience except enjoyment.
joy,
And it was
joy. That's
called the
it.
Family Fun Center. So you were trading this for another type of currency that
They
got
were
you
preparing.
something else. They got
You
you
were being prepared for
entertainment.
this shit. Yeah.
This is a low-key con. Okay? But there had to be a system in place for all this to work. And none of this works without the video game. Okay? And the games don't work without the rules. And the rules don't work without the character or the world that was created. And so you have all these levels inside of a game that you can get stuck in and spend all types of money inside of tokens. And so now you have cryptocurrency come along. And cryptocurrency could not exist until there were first video games and tokens. See? And so now you have all these different types of cryptocurrencies, and 90% of them are tokens. They're
Look, it gets
called,
deeper too.
hold on, they're called tokens. That term comes from video games because it's gamified. These are all games.
Okay, if you on the East Coast, you in New York, you had to have a subway token. Yes, what they're doing is they're making you purchase their currency just for you to use back with them. That's a hustle. The long hustle. And here's what's so crazy. The reason the old heads get so mad over cryptocurrency, first things first, the dollar. Remember the American dollar used to be backed by gold and silver? It ain't backed by shit now. It's backed by the gross domestic product, the GDP. How much your country produces. That's what your money is based on now. Well, how so these people with real dollars get mad over cryptocurrency because they're like, that's not backed by anything. Well, neither is your dollar, motherfucker. How you go? People, these old school motherfuckers, these countries are getting mad because somebody is printing money in their country, and they ain't got no access to it. Like, who you think you are? This money ain't worth nothing. Well, neither is yours, motherfucker. So whenever somebody else gets into the hustle that ain't supposed to be in the hustle, the original hustlers get offended. So you pay attention to who's getting outraged and why they're outraged. They're outraged because you're doing to them what they were doing to the rest of us. That's all this cryptocurrency shit is. And the whole idea is you need to get in and get yours before this market bubble breaks. All cryptocurrency is a localized ecosystem, economy that's being created to have value.
Go back to what you said about the outrage. So about a year ago, there was the fallout with GameSwap, and there was a GameStop, and then there was AMC, and I think there was another cryptocurrency that were trading. And what happened is that the people who were involved on the inside trading told the rest of the people to go and buy this stuff. And it shot up, and people made thousands of dollars. But the funny thing about it is,
a lot of people.
The thing is that this blockchain, these stocks, they weren't worth anything. These stocks weren't worth anything right away. Well, okay, let me back up. It was cryptocurrency, but it was also stocks. Okay, so it was AMC and it was GameStop.
GameStop,
yeah. And so these stocks were worth maybe $1, like maybe a few dollars. Like it was very cheap,
super low,
super cheap.
Low.
And so people who found out about this, they boosted it up through hype, and it sold and it went through the roof. Wall Street found out about this and got mad because they were using Wall Street tactics for the little man. The little man made a bunch of money off this, and Robinhood was the company at the center of it. And a bunch of people got pissed off at Robinhood And they were pissed that a lot of poor people made a bunch of money. So that's why Wall Street was so outraged, because here you are, how dare you give
Do
these
what I do.
secrets to these unwashed masses. You know what I'm saying?
When you reveal the hustle or you take advantage of the hustler is going to always get pissed. The pimp is going to speak up like, my hoe made more money without me. So you got to look at the outrage because it's always a fact. I remember back in the late '80s, early '90s. Remember some Nigerian dude made a shitload of money on the stock market by borrowing money on the margin, which is something white folks do all the time. Companies do. They actually get loans to invest in the stock market. And as long as they make that 15%, which is more than the loan payment, you're cool. What is this Nigerian nigga started doing that shit and making a shitload of money? And they're like, he got arrested for fraud. Like, how is he getting arrested for fraud when you have whole segments of the market doing the exact same thing? The consensus is he's a criminal. Well, if that's the case, they're all criminals then, ain't they?
Yeah, right. See, but the consensus shifts and change all the time. It shifts and changes all the time. And that's what we're learning here is that, oh, this is the story right now, but give it some time. That story is going to change yet again and again and again. People, they wonder, well, will Fauci be punished? Is he going to be arrested? Look, all he's going to get is a slap on the wrist. There's not going to be any major jail time for him. He'll get a fine. He'll have to pay this. He'll get, suspended sentence or some nonsense like that. And it'll be a slap on the wrist. That's what happens to these people.
The only reason I might disagree with you, if it goes up far enough the ladder where somebody important might get, like say 19 important people get in trouble, he'll take the fall. He'll be the fall guy for where he didn't have the power to do all this shit without other people, but it's a whole like the Larry King thing we always talk about. He took the fall for much higher people. If it gets far enough up, it's the same thing with Giselle. She just got arrested for sex trafficking. Well, who does she traffic these kids to? How come you ain't going after the Johns? Like, okay, how do I get convicted of sex trafficking, but you ain't the person who was utilizing my service? How come they ain't in jail?
But let's look into that for a second. She was just continuing the family business.
Yes.
Her father, who worked for Mossad, was a spy, and he used sexual compromise to blackmail people. That's all she was doing. She was working in the realm of vice and found all these rich people who were pedophiles and then used that as a way to make money off of it. She got with Jeffrey Epstein because she needed a face man. So she got this guy to do all the face work, be out with the public, press the flesh, shake hands. That's what Epstein did. But see, now he is taking the fall for it.
But he did.
He's dead. And you can blame a dead guy because he can't defend himself now. He can't testify.
Okay, here's what people don't get. Like I always use the police as an analogy for a reason. How many times have they found a serial killer who killed maybe 50 people, but they'll tack his numbers up to 110? You know why? Because you just cleared a docket. You just solved a bunch of cases. Now, this motherfucker just got executed or whatever, so we contribute another 19 cases to him. Now, I'm not trying to glorify a serial killer. What I'm saying is that cops will use a serial killer to clear off their docket. You dig?
Okay.
This motherfucker couldn't possibly have been all these places at one time. Goddamn, Jack the Ripper, my nigga.
Yes, I'm glad you brought him up because in the second hour, we're going to address that. We're going to address what Jack the Ripper really was. We're going to address all that and a lot more in the second hour. But to close out the first hour, let's stay with Ghislaine for a second because she is connected in more ways than one. And people don't really understand how. But see, you got to trace the money. So a lot of her wealth came from her father. Her father got his wealth through blackmailing people. See, spies don't get paid a lot of money. And so they use criminal activity to accumulate wealth. Well, that's how Robert Maxwell accumulated his wealth. But in the end, he paid for it, and he was found in the ocean after being thrown. His dead body was thrown off of his yacht.
Look, if you ever talk to a CIA agent or FBI agent or whatever, these people don't make a lot of money, but but when they do get paid, or they're assets. They teach these people how to clear their money. They also teach them how to invest their money. You have to make money when you're out there in the wild, and this is what they do. And then they're still loyal to whoever the fuck they're loyal to. But these people are like, okay, I invest the money. What do I do now? And it's sick, it's scary, but again, it's insider trading. they're teaching them, hey, this is how you double your money if you want to keep fucking with us.
Right. And so with Ghislaine's situation, she was connected not just to her father, but through her sister's marriage, she was connected to the dark arts because her sister was married to Molina, and Molina was the guy who worked with Jack Parsons on building rockets for the U.S. during World War II to fight the Nazis. But those people belong to a dark arts, Aleister Crowley, sex magic cult. And so this perfectly ties in with the sexual intrigue and the blackmail that the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell cabal is built upon. Nobody gives another person a mansion for nothing. Epstein was given a mansion by Wexler. That's the guy who controls the Victoria's Secret empire. He owns the Express in all the malls in America. The Gap and all this stuff.
The Gap, yep.
All this stuff, okay? He controls all these. This guy is super rich, but he just gave Epstein a mansion in New York City. That real estate is hella expensive. But see, there are those that will tell you that money came from the Mossad, right? That this was actually dirty spy money. And so he had this island. But see, okay, there's the island, but there's also they call Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. And Epstein won the lottery in New Mexico several times. How is this possible? This guy won the state lottery millions of dollars several times. It's because it was money laundering.
It was rigged. The fix is in.
The fix has always been on. And so they're laundering this money through the lottery system in New Mexico. He has this eugenics ranch in New Mexico called the Zorro Ranch. And nobody's talking about this at all. There has been no talk about the Zorro Ranch in this trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. And so she has been accused of being a sex trafficker, right? And that's it. She got, I think 4 or 5 counts of sex trafficking. Okay? But in comparison to what really happened, it's a slap on the wrist. But the sentencing hasn't started yet. They're going to do that, I think, in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be talking about that here. So there's more to the story. But Ghislaine Maxwell is only scratching the surface. And there are more Epstein Islands all around the world. And there's more Zorro eugenics ranches all around the world. So basically what Epstein wanted to be was like this Jewish Hitler. And he wanted to genetically control a line of people to create a evil empire.
A bunch of money hidden amongst themselves. Just they're creating their own economy, their own people, their own everything.
That's right.
And you can't get in.
That's right. It's Look, man, it's a control system. All right. It's the club and you and I ain't in it.
Nope.
Quote George Carlin.
So you look in the door, Cat Williams said, I saw what it was like in there. It wasn't worth it.
Right. And you see what happened to him.
Yeah.
But the consensus is that he's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Look, the term
Cat is a little. That motherfucker's crazy, but he's funny and he's intelligent at the same time. So
he could be eccentric, but the thing is, when you call somebody crazy, like Dave Chappelle said, it's super dismissive. You're like, man, that nigga crazy. So all of a sudden, everything he or she says no longer has any validity to it.
None whatsoever.
And you do that shit. The same thing is, I just think it's odd that Prince and Michael Jackson died in similar ways. They both died of quote unquote overdoses and shit like that. I'm like, for real? So whenever these niggas about to speak out, you suicide them or you overdose them, and like, damn, Michael was on those. What the hell ever, dude? That nigga drank juice all the time. Y'all keep fucking with these motherfuckers. But the problem is, what you're doing is discrediting whatever they said that had any validity to it. When Prince was talking about there were 8 other presidents before George Washington, motherfucker, a white boy said, I had to go look it up. It was true. So what happens is when these people get this money, yeah, they might have did some fucked up shit along the way, some fucking satanic shit, because that's what the industry was doing to them. But when they got rich enough, they woke up. I ain't say they got woke, but they woke up and realized, oh, this is what's going on. They understood the game as they started playing it. When they started playing the game, that's all of a sudden that's when they became a problem. When Mike brought up all those music rights and gave them back to niggas, he was a problem. That's the shit that happens, and then you end up dead at your own house with your own doctor. How you die when you got your own doctor? The nigga was there.
Crazy, but that's the consensus: is that he died and he overdosed, and it was all his fault, and he had nothing to do with it. But Prince is walking around talking about chemtrails and putting all this information out there that they really don't want out there. But the consensus is that he just overdosed from fentanyl.
A little feminine nigga overdosing this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Had no will. That nigga was expecting to die no time soon. That's all I'm telling you.
Pretty much. So again, the story continues. The narrative goes on. And the consensus is we live in this world where a wet market created a virus and the rest of the world got sick and got locked down, but everything is going to be okay because everybody's on our side. Consensus is an idea that is agreed upon by a group. And there are many of those that we understand to be what forms the formation, what forms the foundation of our reality. These ideas. But many of these ideas are based on lies. And if you've been listening to this show, then you understand that even better now. But so I want to take this time to thank you listeners who contributed to the full show, who have listened to the entire 2-hour show. And this is the beginning of our new platform where we offer a 2-hour show. And that is for the listeners who are willing to pay and to contribute to what it is we're doing here and show that you appreciate what it is we're doing here. And we appreciate you very much for riding with us and continuing to be a part of the 7th grade mustache. We will continue to give you the deepest of conversations and bringing you the blunt, clean, straight up facts. All right? That's all we got. We out. Peace.
Holla back when we appreciate you.